All right. Well, we'll give this just another minute or so as folks are trickling in. I know people are coming from other sessions. And we'll get started in about 2 minutes.
And thank you, Erica. I may or may not be caffeinating a little bit.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Oh my God, I had to not pop a beer 4 times. I kept going, no, I have an appointment.
Yeah, because it's later in the evening for y'all, so.
Yeah, it's 7:30. I'm actually at a friend's birthday party in her bedroom.
I was wondering, I was like, God, she got fancy for this. I'm like, I'm partying it on my pajamas.
That's kind of for a birthday party, yeah.
I thought about, like, you know, makeuping up, etc., and I'm like, no, the webcam doesn't even show any of that. So
yeah, I came here and helped her figure out all the social separation part of hosting, 10 people, but having everything, hand sanitizer stations and all the stuff, because that's kind of who I am in my friend group now.
Yep.
There you go. Well, it looks like we've got folks filtering in online. For those who are tweeting along or following on social media, this is at the Maker Mask, makermask.org. And we're going to be talking today about serving underserved communities with mask making. And in particular, some of the specific issues that we have run into in our experience over at makermask.org in how we do that, and our friends that are out in the maker community, how they're serving their communities of need. So in terms of format today, we're going to go for about the first half of the hour with some short presentations from our panelists sharing their experiences in working with underserved communities. We'll turn for the second half to more of a group discussion and have some time for some Q&A, hopefully through the chat window there on Zoom. If you have any questions at all, you can hit me. I'm Erica Wagner, the moderator for today. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. We're going to start today with these short vignettes, sort of some pieces of advice and lessons learned and thoughts from 5 of our great makers and designers and mask scientists out in the community right now. We're going to start by talking with Rachel McCrafty-Sad out in Oakland, California, about urban, unsheltered, and low-income communities. Jocelyn Slunger and Brianna Drohan in Orange, Massachusetts are going to talk to us about serving their launch space, makerspace in the rural communities. Matt White's going to give us some insights into the unique issues with masks and visually impaired individuals. And then we'll close up this session with Hope talking about children and the unique issues that families are facing as we're trying to get into serving everybody out in our community as everyone comes back into the workforce and into interactions. So with that, let me kick it off over to Rachel. And Rachel, why don't you tell us what's been going on out at Ace Maker Toys in Oakland?
Hi, you know what my name is, Rachel McCrafty-Sad, also go by Crafty. I'm in Oakland, California, just across the bay from San Francisco, and I'm the executive director at Ace Monster Toys Makerspace. We're a 10-year-old makerspace, so pretty well established in a very urban environment. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the project that we put together to serve low-income and unsheltered folks with mask making, and kind of the key learning that we had from that experience. Not that we're done learning, we're still mask making, but we saw a need. We saw that our community really stepped forward incredibly well to cover folks who were healthcare providers. And then when we talked to healthcare providers, they were like, and we were like, what's the next thing we should do? Who's the next folks we should serve? And they're like, people in skilled nursing facilities and the homeless people, because those are the folks who are going to max out the hospitals and who are going to be the most vulnerable. And then, of course, they pointed out to the low-income wage workers who are really doing these incredible vital services that are keeping the rest of us functioning. And so we took that on. The first thing that we did is we tried to be incredibly thoughtful about consulting the experts. We're great at serving the maker community, but that still tends to be folks of privilege who have spare time and access to technology, even if it's just a laptop and an internet connection permanently. So that's not necessarily who we were making masks for. So we got with our local groups who serve those communities already. Folks like the East Oakland Collective, Punks with Lunch, Toolworks, who do in-home healthcare, and the grocery stores in the middle of food deserts who are serving those communities in a compounded way. And we were like, we assume we don't know what we're doing, you know what you're doing. And we created partnerships for our distribution because they're already helping these folks. They're already feeding these folks. And we didn't need to rebuild the wheel. We also talked to managers of those stores, from the small business bodega to that one grocery store that's in the middle of that food desert, to go, what do your people really need? Tell us about their daily experience so that we could make good choices for that, and tell us about their lifestyle, which kind of got us to lifestyle. And we had to consider things like the average grocery worker is going to be between transportation and doing their job. They're going to be out in the world at risk for approximately 9 hours at a shot, wearing that same mask the whole 9 hours. And we had to think about things like, well, what do they do if it gets accidentally contaminated? Because they're not going to go home. They're just going to keep putting themselves at risk. You know, people are grimy. Like, is it comfortable to wear? Are they going to wear something highly uncomfortable? And just like trying to do our best to design something that would make it easy for them to stay safe. And those considerations also went into the conversation about people who are unsheltered, potentially people who just lost their jobs, who have to live in cars or in campers or in tents, in camp villages. What are the lifestyle considerations? And then we had to do some work and let go of our assumptions. Unhoused doesn't mean unemployed. There's a huge swath of unhoused people in America who have jobs, who work hard, who just, you know, can't handle the rent, especially in urban areas. And it also doesn't mean that they're lazy or stupid. It just means that they have less resources. And to ensure that the way that we present ourselves and the mask always is with dignity. You know, we're just helping our neighbor, and it doesn't matter if they live in a house or not. And then also just be practical. Let's be practical and ensure that that we wrote our instructions in a simple, easy to follow way. We picked our designs and our materials to be cleanable in lots of scenarios, not just for the lucky folks who have a washer and dryer in their house. And those were kind of like our biggest considerations when we thought about adequately serving these folks. Because we know that, you know, that being thoughtful was going to be the key to being successful in actually helping them. And it can be little things like take an extra day and get your instructions translated to the local alternate language, whether it's Spanish or potentially something else. Write your instructions as simply as possible. Package your things so that they are not going to get potentially contaminated during distribution, and that they're easily cleanable. And so kind of for us, it made it worth the extra mile and easy to decide to do things like individually ziplocking, or, you know, double language instructions, ensuring that we had multiple or flexible fit design for the NWPP we were using NWPP because there were multiple ways to clean it. So that was really the key learning when we took on this project. And currently, we hit distribution today of 1,300 masks. So we're extremely pleased, especially considering that we're tapping a volunteer bank of 8 sewists who pump that out. And we're going to continue until we hit about 3,400, because that's how much materials we have today. And we're not only making masks for low-income and unsheltered people, we're using some of our funding to provide people temp jobs, because that is what is meaningful in our area for folks who lost opportunities when their industries got shuttered. For folks who are interested in more information about the main project, which is called Distill My Heart, we have bags from the distilling conference. You can find that information at thecraftyavenger.com/distill-my-heart. And we even have a under the hood view of how we organized our project across not just my makerspace, but multiple maker resources in the Bay Area.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That's a really fantastic overview and a good reminder that these slides will be made available on the makermask.org website later on for those who want to follow up with these resources or have access to the slide content. Thanks so much. So let's turn the narrative a little bit and look to the other side of the country and a very different scenario where Brianna and Jocelyn working in Orange, Massachusetts in a more rural area. Why don't y'all tell us a little bit about your experiences there?
Hi, I'm Dr. Jocelyn Songer in Orange, Massachusetts. And lots of people don't believe that it exists, but there are rural parts of Massachusetts. And for me, I've grown up here all my life, and I've spent the better part of the last 5 or 6 years backpacking across America on foot. And most of that has been rural America. So as the pandemic started to spread, my communities, which were already located in very diffuse areas throughout rural America and beyond, were struggling. And so I started researching, designing, and sort of putting together information about masks for my local community, and then for my communities up and down the Appalachian Mountains and up and down the Pacific Crest Trail and throughout Central America and like both the US and outside of the US. And so it's this like strange distributed network to begin with. And so I started off with this like, okay, it's easy to help the people in my household, and I'm asthmatic and I have all this experience, but how do I help the other loved ones in my communities, which are already this far diverse spread thing? And having lived sort of where I have my entire life, and then walking at 2 miles an hour through the country, like the people I call family are everywhere. And so that was sort of how this all spun up from the Maker Mask perspective of how do I get the information out so that it is not just relying on me and my personal resources in dealing with lack of resources, lack of transportation, the fact that we're not in walking distance. It's hard to get people into the same, well, nowadays it seems like time zone, but all of those challenges. And rural communities are a large part of the US that we don't hear from a lot, and sort of getting those resources is still a challenge. But being able to coordinate with other maker spaces, makers, small manufacturers, including the people on this call and in this team, and just an amazing group of people who are dealing with a lot of the same challenges and trying to interface. And so Rachel was talking about getting things translated in different languages. And so it's been really cool to see the ways that these diverse maker communities have been able to come together and help get masks and information into their communities. And I just have to say that, like, for me, that has been one of the awesome things to see through all this. And it's a little challenging because I'm still mostly providing information, design, best practices, listening to users, and like helping sort through the science and translate it from my engineering science researcher speak into the what the heck are you talking about, Jocelyn? So to make it more accessible across the communities that count to the people who are in them. And so while I've been doing this, it's been really great working with Launch Space here in Brianna in Orange, Massachusetts, because it started with me wanting to get masks into my local community and not seeing it. And it's so much more complicated than that, but getting masks into the hands of our local first responders. And Rachel has been doing that in her area. Hope's been doing that in hers, but I wanted to hand off to Brianna to talk about how she's kind of been working with the Maker Mask side of things to get masks into our local community here in rural Massachusetts. So, Brianna?
Yeah, so thank you, Jocelyn. So I'm Brianna Drowan. I'm the co-founder of Launch Space, which is a 10,000 square foot maker space in Western Mass, a small community. The North Quabbin community serves about 30,000. Orange itself is about 4,000. So, you know, a typical rural post-industrial town. And, you know, at the start of this pandemic, when we couldn't function as a makerspace, we were trying to figure out what we could do to help. And we saw a lot of DIYers making masks out of their home, but we wanted to make sure that if we were going to do this, we wanted to be able to know that we had something to back it. And, again, collaboration is the middle of this slide with all the arrows pointed towards it. It's all about collaboration. And we were linked up with Jocelyn, and Maker Mask, which really provided us, you know, there's so much that we've learned about the science of non-woven polypropylene and the differences of different materials and layers and testing. And it was really important to us that if we're going to do anything, what we're going to do, it makes sense and has some research that we didn't know to provide to the community. And so we assembled this amazing team of 4 people, from health insurance to business incubation, you know, Maker Mask, of course, and Launch Space. And we decided that we, you know, as a team had the Mask Project, MASS capital K. So the logo, as you can see, looks like Massachusetts, to try and donate 10,000 masks to Massachusetts. And that, you know, the collaboration part of that was we realized we could, you know, that goal became attainable because Maker Mask had already been on this stage for a while and was able to guide us and kind of hold our hand through this process and funnel, you know, material to us so that we are in our maker space, using our laser cutter to cut up patterns, you know, having a team of volunteers to break down the bags, a team of volunteers who help cut out different patterns that can't go through the laser cutter, some volunteers to help pack these kits that we have, and they go out into the community of sewers that they sew and bring back to us. And then we pack from donations. We sent out links to different healthcare facilities to get donation requests. So we set up this kind of volunteer manufacturing collective in our community, which is kind of how we had to do it, because the challenge with rural areas is low population. So we had to really look at who are our community engaged clubs, Rotary Club, Veterans Clubs, Legions, Lions Clubs, and reach out to them and say, look, we're doing this for the community. And, you know, we need your support. And of course, you know, talking to your local legislators is always a good thing. So, and then of course, with being in a rural area, there's some issues with lack of access to internet. And transportation. So we had to be really creative with media, you know, social media, of course, but also newspaper articles, contacting our local newspapers and making sure that we're staying relevant with them, that our voice is heard through our local newspapers, flyers, because not everybody has internet or reads the newspaper. So it was really trying to make sure that we had a lot of outreach into the community. And at this point, we've cut and put into kits about 3,000 masks. And we've donated upwards of 2,000. So we're starting to move towards our goal. And of course, the more that people see what we're doing, the more engagement we have in the community. Something that's been really helpful is working with, and I suggest anybody who's trying to do this in a rural area is really tap into your civil clubs, because they're the ones that are already engaged, and they're kind of like the low-hanging fruit of, here's what we're doing. Can you get into your networks and help support us? And that's kind of the leveraging of the social capital.
Because we're not doing it alone, like without collaborating and listening and working together, it's not possible. In the rural areas, at least where I am, getting those wheels turning to actually get everything out there is one of the challenges. And so many thank yous to all the people everywhere that are working with their local communities to get them what they need.
Yeah, thanks so much. And really, I mean, moving to 10,000 masks, it's an incredible trajectory that y'all are on there, Brianna. I'm really excited about what's going on at Launch Space.
Thank you.
I want to turn the conversation to our third sort of community of interest in this conversation. So Matt White sharing a perspective of how we deal with some of the unique challenges that the visually impaired community is having, and how individuals who are visually impaired are getting access to masks and good information about masks. So Matt?
Yep, my name is Matthew White, like Erga said. I come at this from a completely different background. I'm not a scientist. My day job is an IT systems engineer. I live and work in Washington, DC. But one thing that I've been looking at social media recently, and one thing I kept running across was blind people saying that they were having trouble finding information about masks. Somebody's like, oh, there's all these DIY projects, but I can't read the instructions. Or the more interesting thing was that the information access issue that's an ongoing one, and I'll talk about that a little more in a second. But the other one, the theme was popping up that blind people wearing masks were having their ability to navigate affected. And so if you're you might be familiar with the imagery of a blind person using a white cane or a guide dog. And if somebody's been formally trained with mobility instruction at an early age, or when they lost their blindness, they're taught to use a cane to basically sweep in front of them on the ground to detect objects. And so that's a taught skill. But another mechanism for navigation, which is pretty much developed on your own, it's not taught, is based on auditory cues. As you're walking through your environment, the way that sounds bounce off of you, bounce off of the surfaces around you, change the way the sounds hit your ears. So, any sort of change in the way sound is perceived could impact that. And then there also are some blind people that do a clicking sound with their tongue, to basically, I call that basically active sonar. The other method I was talking about, I call more of a passive thing. But what was happening is people were wearing masks, and then this, as people were starting to venture back out into the world, and they were saying, oh, wow, I was going outside and I know there's a pole over in this area, and I could usually tell where it is, by sound, but I walked right into it, so it's, so, and that's how I got looped into this team. I've known Dr. Songer for quite a long time. And I know she's got a bunch of experience with researching auditory issues and how the ear works. So I got in touch a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, what's this all about? Why is this happening? And we talked about the ways that sound is bounced off of your face, off of your shoulders, before it hits your ears. And Jocelyn can explain that much better than I can. But in any event, when you put a mask over your face, you are putting a layer or multiple layers over your face. And if it's a material like cotton, it's going to absorb some of those sounds and or change the way they hit your ears. So, we don't, there's not really, we're still in the early stages of trying to figure out exactly how to address that. What the maker mask team is using non-woven polypropylene. So we're going to send some masks out to a few different people that are experiencing some of these issues and kind of find out, does this make any appreciable difference in the way you perceive sound, or does it improve it? Does it make it worse? We're still in the information gathering phase on that, but it's really interesting. The blind community is typically, I would say, considered underserved in a lot of ways. One of the biggest barriers is access to information, mostly due to information being visual in nature in many instances. And also there are some socioeconomic reasons that affect your ability to access information. Like Rachel was talking about making information available to people who don't speak English. Brianna was talking about putting flyers up because not everybody reads the paper or watches the news or has access to the internet. So, if you're blind, a lot of those methods, they don't do anything for you because you don't even know they're there. You could be walking down the sidewalk, walk past a flyer, and you may not be able to read it even if you knew it was there, but you wouldn't even know it was there. So that's a significant information access issue. So that's it was really nice that I was able, because of my because I know Jocelyn, I was able to reach out and say, hey, let's see if we can figure out a solution for this. So that's pretty much what I have.
Thanks so much, Matt. And I think that's an important perspective, on how access to information, access to masks, and access to community all matter here. For the last little segment of our upfront piece of this programming, we're going to turn to Hope Metzler, who's going to talk to us about the sort of unique access challenges that families with young kids are having, and coming to us from the Baltimore area. Hope, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name's, am I muted? No.
You're good.
I'm good. Hi, my name's Hope Metzler, and I'm a special educator, developmental therapist, early childhood special educator. All those are me. And I met these folks because I also began to research when COVID became dominant in our lives, and found that non-woven polypropylene was an excellent match for me. And that's how I met this group. As far as children go, the CDC does not have a lot of information about making masks for children. They only have shared that very first line that you see, and they've only given the guidance that we should not be putting masks under children under 24 months old. If anyone that has trouble breathing, or anyone that cannot remove a face mask without assistance. Those next two, number 2 and number 3, they refer to anyone, even an adult. So I've consulted with other families that have maybe an adult with severe profound disabilities, and they were talking about heavy drilling and how the mask would get so wet because it was made of cotton. And I said, we're going to have to come out with some alternatives, because if that person can't take off the mask by themselves, the CDC has stated that they should not be wearing a mask, and we can come up with some other alternatives to help protect that person. Yeah. Back to children though, the CDC themselves do not share a whole lot of information. Luckily, we have the Academy of Pediatrics. The Academy of Pediatrics has come out with a wealth of information but not about making masks for children. They do cover things like, well, why should a child be wearing them? They talk about, what do I do if my child is afraid of them? How do I get them to wear it and keep it on? When should they wear it? Should they wear it outside, et cetera, et cetera. So the Academy of Pediatrics has some excellent information about that, but not a lot about making masks for children. And in the groups that I'm in, such as Facebook groups or on Twitter, I'm seeing a lot of questions about that.
Yeah.
What we do know and what is suggested is that we don't place an adult size mask on a child. Why is that? The answer is because we're looking at fit. That is the best thing we can do for our child, is to make sure that the mask fits them well. And lucky for us, we have so many people out there making and designing fabulous masks that you can either download your own pattern if you are, a skilled sewist, or you can go onto Etsy or any other place to buy masks and find one that will perfectly match your child's face. The fit is key, which brings us right into ties or loops. I have a lot of people that ask me that. The Academy of Pediatrics recommends ties, and I think that's because a child is less likely to mess with the ties on the back of the head. Did I say ties twice? They recommend behind the ear. If I said it wrong the first time, they recommend behind the ear. And why is that? Because children might mess with, and of course, children have that silky smooth hair, and the ties behind on the hair tend to slip down, and next thing you know, the mask has fallen. So behind the ears seems to be a very good fit, but again, we don't want it too loose. Fabric, of course, the CDC, well, we don't really have a lot of information about fabric, which is why I've joined this fantastic group, because of the research that they do at makermask.org. But we do know that they recommend at least 2 layers, and to not go to the point where your child can't breathe. So fit, breathability, what type of fabric you choose is based upon, you want your child to be able to breathe. 6 layers might obviously be too much. 2 is what is recommended by the CDC. Breathability brings me right into decorations. I am seeing some absolutely adorable masks with the cute fox's nose and the cute little addition ears and a large crocodile nose on the front. They're all so incredibly adorable, but to me, they're more novelty masks, and I just love to see them, but I don't know that much material over the nostrils and mouth is going to provide the breathability and the breathability that the child needs to wear it for a long time. Now, if they were going to wear it to play in the house, to go somewhere that is very low risk outside, to get that laugh factor, how wonderful. But if they're going inside somewhere, shopping somewhere, that they're going to be at a much higher risk, then a regular homemade pleated mask is absolutely perfect for those kids. And that's it. These links that I have shared at the bottom are absolutely fabulous. And I really recommend the one from the Academy of Pediatrics.
Thanks so much, Hope. Jocelyn, I want to throw this one back to you just for a moment. As we start to think about safety and science, starting perhaps with children's masks, how do we start to think about the unique safety considerations for some of these underserved communities? Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, that I feel like that is another one of those. It could be an hour, because I've mentioned this analogy in other contexts, but kind of like shoes, one size fits all, one shoe fits everybody. Like the number of answers you get for what the best thing is going to vary, and there isn't nearly as much science as we'd like to have to broach sort of this new category of mask that the CDC is recommending that everybody across the country use, and that localities and municipalities are requiring, and that we recommend. And so we're all kind of learning together, and it is both a beautiful thing to see and a challenging thing to see, especially, as you say, as we talk about some of the voices that don't get heard in the dialogue quite as much. And so for safety equipment, the best safety equipment you have is the stuff that A, you have with you, B, you're willing to use, C, you're able to use, and D, that doesn't do more harm than good. Like, I feel like that is a real central thing to think about as we're kind of navigating this with reusable masks, especially. That's a fairly new category of item to have being propagated so widely so fast. And what's the best way to wash it? What's the best way to clean it? Like, do you disinfect? Do you sterilize? What are the differences and what are the risks for different communities, different populations, different physiologies, different neurochemistry? Like, there are so many variables here. So like, I really appreciate the people that are taking the time to look into best practices and to sort of work with us to develop them so that we can get safer masks for all of our communities out there.
Yeah,
And
I think that's a really great point, especially the mask that you can have with you and use is going to be critical. So thinking about the ways that we enhance that are sort of the job of all of us in the maker community.
Right.
Matt, do you mind if I keep this one rolling? Matt, we were thinking earlier about how are we more inclusive about our communications and making information more accessible. What do you think about in terms of what the maker community can do to make this information more accessible?
That's a great question. And basically, we have to make a couple assumptions here, because, if you don't have access to a computer or smartphone, then you're already kind of at a disadvantage there. But with that assumption in mind, that you have access to a smartphone or a computer, when you are producing content for consumption by everyone, including people with that are experiencing blindness, it's important to adequately describe any images and graphics that are commonly found. So you have directions that say you're gonna provide a mask to somebody. Well, the first question they might have is, which way is up? How do I put it on? That sort of thing. So if a picture is worth 1,000 words, well, no picture, that you don't get any information. But the thing is, if you can't see the picture, then you're missing all that content. So when you are producing instructional documentation, tag your, use alt tags, in web speak. You can use like on Facebook, you can add captions to photos. Just be cognizant of the tools that you have available to make sure you can convey the information in a textual manner that's more usable for everybody.
Thanks so much, Matt. We see a question in the chat thread here about our friends in the community that are deaf or hearing impaired. When we're talking about mask wearing and its intersection with sign language and lip reading, Hope, I know you have some experience in that arena. Why don't you take that one first?
I do. Let me piggyback something off of Matt said just for one quick second. The majority of masks being made right now are being made with one color on the inside, one color on the outside, so that the person knows which they've used when they're being sent to the medical community, which is fabulous. But if I was making them with anyone in mind, which would include those with visual impairments, I would put something tactile on the outside, and that way, such as the nose piece doesn't have to be embedded inside the fabric. It can be on a flap on the outside of the fabric, and then that way the person with a visual impairment always knows, which side it is. So anything tactile that you can add is brilliant.
Some sort of orientation tag or something like that too.
Exactly. Anything that that would give them the information they need. Now, with the hearing impaired, what I have found with what I've seen with mask making and the hearing impaired is that majority of the masks that are being made for those that work with the hearing impaired are, say, for speech and language pathologists and, you know, for any of the deaf educators. And the windows that they're creating and putting in using vinyl are enormous, sometimes from, you know, tip to stern. I mean, there are these windows that will go to the full floor. And of course, the first question is what's the breathe, you know, can you breathe in that thing? And how much fog are you getting? And then they're brainstorming ways, you know, like, you know, diving, you know, divers put, or a little bit of soap. And I'm thinking, yeah, try that soap on your mask and get back to me on how that works. What I'm recommending is a much smaller window because the deaf themselves are very accustomed to reading. And even though the mouth gives a lot of information, so does the eyes, the shoulders, the body language. They get so much information in the mouth. And not and they can do it. I mean, my friends have told me, no, wearing a mask is fine. What's more difficult are the ones that are working with the hearing impaired, such as children or the ones that need that. And what I'm recommending is that the window for the mouth not be that big, because you need that air to, you need the material for it to go in and out. And when people ask me about, well, what do I do for the window when it starts to fog? I said, hey, I was a competitive swimmer all my life and we used spit. I mean, it's your own mask. And that's what we did. We put spit in our goggles and I did it all my life. And that's the most brilliant way to keep your mask from fogging up. There you
Rachel, I know you have some experience in this arena as well. You want to talk to yours?
Absolutely. I have a dear friend who's an audiologist who works with people who are either their children who are getting education on how to navigate the world with hearing impairment, or people who are just becoming hearing impaired in their later years. And for those folks, for that, you know, when the little window doesn't cut it, because they're trying to teach somebody the vernacular of facial expression communication. What we're looking at and experimenting with are what's called like a beekeeper style hood, using a combination of face shield material with, of all things for defogging, a thin layer of shaving cream, and modifications on what's called a papper hood. So it's not meant for isolation, but it's small powered fans with filters. Because one of the drawbacks of, like, you get the full face view, so that's really excellent for the person working in that field medically, for everything that they're doing. But there's not enough air pressure to force air in and out of the NWPP or cotton that the rest of the piece is made out of. So you actually have to mechanically start pushing air, and they're not designed, like I said, for isolation. In isolation wear, it's the way that papper hoods are, but they're extremely affordable, easy to make in any maker space. It's a little motor with a little fan and a battery and a switch. And we're finding that the initial results on those kinds of prototypes are very good. The manufacturer drawback is that you need some acreage of NWPP to make one of those hoods, but it is absolutely the preferred material for those hoods. Cotton failed immediately because of moisture and the inability for it to be sanitized with any practicality.
For those who aren't familiar with the vernacular, NWPP being non-woven polypropylene, the same material that your common reusable shopping bags are made out of.
And I'd just like to mention that as we innovate and come up with awesome, creative, functional solutions, that we're dealing with things that are designed to cover the mouth and nose. So as we go down these roads, just make sure that all the little red flags are up, because there are a lot of safety issues that haven't been worked out yet. And like, to be having people thinking about that when you're fully enclosing the head, that is a whole new level of risk. And like, can you take it off? what are you inhaling? And I think both Rachel and Hope touched on the fact that when masks start getting wet and funky, the current guidance is that you should change it. And there's a whole bunch of extra stuff about whether, like, having one mask you can use is a fair amount of privilege, right? Having enough so that you can change them every time they're wet, that is like, do you have enough resources for those financially, time-wise, all those things? So there are all these interesting things. And if you're reusing a mask, clean it. Things love to grow in moist, wet environments. Your face, your mouth and nose, they grow lots of things. And it's not just COVID that you should be thinking about as you go to reuse your masks.
Yeah, thanks. And Dr. Songer has really put out a great piece on this morning here at Virtually Maker Faire. And there's also a piece on our website about cleaning and disinfection. And particularly as we're talking about underserved communities, not everyone has access to a washer and dryer. I know for me, I have an old camp pot that sits on my stove. When I come back in from the grocery store, my mask goes in the pot and I boil it for 10 minutes. And that's one of those great proven disinfection strategies that has a lot more accessibility than some of the other things that we're seeing out in the community. I want to turn just for a minute back to Brianna and what's been going out at Launch Space and with the Mask Project. Brianna, I know you're thinking a lot about what comes out of this project for the future and how we have sort of durable impacts beyond the lifespan of COVID-19. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So, you know, being in a rural community, we're thinking about, and, you know, it's everybody on this. Right now, we're kind of in a triage, you know, part of this pandemic. We've come a long way in aspects, but, you know, how do we prevent something like this in the future? And so we've been working on working with our local business, Massachusetts Business Incubator, part of our team, and Jocelyn, thinking about, you know, how do we, at the end of this, continue to serve the community? So what we are to do through the donations, we're strategically doing donations to healthcare facilities and asking for letters of intent to use that'll show that they potentially would purchase for us if we were going to monetize these efforts, so that we can put that into a business plan and fund it, so that at the end of this, we can have a small manufacturer in our region that can serve about a 50-mile radius, which would go, you know, into New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, and the western part of Connecticut, that not only does PPE, of course, because, you know, you can't do that forever in a small manufacturer in this area. So what we're trying to do is coordinate efforts to have a small manufacturer that uses the same material for different items that can pivot in different, with the need and demand during a pandemic. And then working with Jocelyn and Maker Mask, looking at testing facilities. You know, that's something that is lacking all over the country. And, you know, we're really thinking about coming out of this with a hold of a company that, you know, won't be our company, we'll incubate it and someone else will run it, but that'll serve the rural community after this, so that when and if this happens again, whether it's a wave or a different pandemic, we can be, you know, we have access. We don't have to wait for things and try to, you know, do what we're doing now and funneling, you know, reusable bags to cut up and volunteers and all this stuff. We'll have it ready.
So sustainability, access, and jobs.
And employment, yeah, exactly.
Employment is a huge challenge, and a lot of in my community and communities, it's like a real challenge in a lot of rural America is sustainability of jobs and access.
Yeah.
Well, plus, when you look at the current situation, we've gone from 4% to essentially 30% unemployment in the last 2 months. So the job situation is even more dire.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to give one last chance for everyone to have a shot at our final question. And that's just one piece of advice you have for the maker communities and folks that are thinking about equity and inclusion in their work with providing solutions for COVID-19. Jocelyn, we'll start with you and then we'll go around the group. What's one last piece of advice?
Be ready, willing, and able to learn as much as you can from the people who you're working with. Like if you're not listening and able to have two-way communication, whatever that looks like, it's a dialogue. It isn't a right, wrong, binary thing. Like we need to be listening and coming together to find better solutions, and that's gonna remain true.
Thanks. Matt, thoughts and final words.
The same theme, information accessibility, basically. Make sure that the material that you're putting together has the broadest audience possible. And, to Jocelyn's point, listen to the communities that you're trying to serve. Don't just push a solution at somebody and get mad when they're like, oh, this is not going to work. So yeah, talk, listen, and make the information accessible.
Good wise words at any time. Brianna?
I think, collaboration, especially in rural areas where, like, again, low population density. Look to your social service agencies, look to what their needs are, talk to your hospitals, talk to your neighbor, and partner with people like Maker Mask. We wouldn't be able to be doing what we're doing without you guys. So, it's those collaborations and outreach and, figuring out the need. And again, we're all talking about the same thing, and for access to information and utilizing it and being ready and able and willing.
Yeah, don't just hear, but also listen.
Yeah.
Rachel? Looks like you might be on mute there. If you want to hit that mute button one more time.
There we go. So my takeaway and the thing that I would love to share with folks is don't be overwhelmed by this overwhelming problem and think that you have to solve the whole thing. The little actions you take, the 10 masks you take, the checking on your neighbor once matters.
Mm-hmm.
Those little things matter, and you don't need anybody's permission to listen to people and help. You have it.
Absolutely.
You're allowed to help even if you can't solve it for your entire community, and it is absolutely worthwhile.
It made a difference for that one. Hope, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I just want to talk about special populations, especially when we're talking about children, and to please reach out to your pediatrician, your teachers, your early interventionist, your speech pathologist, everyone you work with, including other parents. They will share their successes, their things to do, kids with high sensory needs, children with immune disorder. Everything that you need is going to be out there. You're going to have to brainstorm, and please remember fit and breathability.
That's a great place to wrap this up. The struggle is real. So for those of you interested in joining us in this continuing journey after Virtually Maker Faire is over, encourage you to check out makermask.org, where a lot of this information gets published as we write that up and dig through the science to find best practices and lessons learned. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter at The Maker Mask, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much for making time in your Saturday to join us here, and have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you.